They told you being alone meant something was wrong with you. That if your phone stayed silent, if nobody checked on you, if your weekend had no plans, if you sat in a room with nothing but your own thoughts, then somehow you had failed. But what if they were wrong? What if being alone was never the punishment? What if it was the place where life finally stopped lying to you? Because when the room gets quiet, something strange happens. The version of you that performs for others begins to disappear. The smile you wear so people do not ask questions starts to fade. The personality you built to be accepted, admired, chosen, or needed begins to loosen its grip. And beneath all of that noise, you meet someone you may have been avoiding for years. Yourself. Welcome to Stoic Chisel. And if this message speaks to something you have been quietly feeling, but never knew how to explain, subscribe to the channel, because this is where we sharpen the mind, strengthen the spirit, and learn how to stand steady even when the world grows silent. Most people do not fear being alone. They fear what being alone reveals. They fear the moment when there is no one left to impress, no one left to distract them, no one left to blame, and no crowd loud enough to cover the questions rising inside them. Why do I need someone to text me before I feel important? Why does silence make me feel abandoned? Why do I keep chasing people who only make me feel smaller? Why do I feel empty when nobody is watching? These are not comfortable questions, but the Stoics never believed comfort was the highest goal of life. They believed clarity was. They believed character was. They believed freedom was. And freedom begins when a person can sit alone without immediately reaching for a distraction to rescue them from their own mind. Look around at the modern world. People cannot stand in line without checking their phone. They cannot eat alone without feeling judged. They cannot spend a quiet evening by themselves without filling the room with noise, scrolling, videos, messages, anything to avoid the weight of stillness. We call this connection, but often it is escape. We are more reachable than ever, yet many people feel more lost than ever. We have hundreds of contacts, followers, notifications, conversations, and still, deep inside, there is a hunger that no amount of attention can feed, because attention is not the same as peace. Being seen is not the same as being known, and being surrounded is not the same as being whole. This is why being alone can feel so threatening. It removes the audience, it removes the applause, it removes the borrowed identity you carry in public. And suddenly, you are left with the raw truth of who you are when nobody is there to approve of you. For some people, that silence feels like rejection, but for the Stoic, that silence is training. It is the private battlefield where you learn whether you are ruled by your impulses, your fears, your memories, your need for validation, or by something deeper, something steadier, something that cannot be taken from you by a person leaving, a message unanswered, or a room becoming empty. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but much of his strength came from the conversations he had with himself, not with crowds, not with applause, not with people telling him who he was, but in reflection, in solitude, in the quiet discipline of examining his own thoughts. Because the person who cannot face himself will always be controlled by the world, controlled by praise, controlled by rejection, controlled by attention, controlled by absence. But the person to be alone without collapsing begins to become dangerous in a different way. Not violent, not cold, not detached. Dangerous because they can no longer be easily manipulated. They do not accept disrespect just to avoid silence. They do not chase people who treat them like an option. They do not betray their values just to belong to a crowd that would forget them tomorrow. They begin to understand that being alone is not the same as being unwanted. Sometimes being alone means life is clearing the noise so you can hear your own soul again. So before you run from solitude, ask yourself one question. What if the silence you keep escaping is not empty? What if it is waiting to teach you who you are? And what if the strongest version of you can only be born in the place you were taught to fear? The first thing solitude does is remove your hiding places. That is why it feels uncomfortable, not because silence is dangerous, but because silence has no mercy for the stories you use to avoid yourself. When the noise disappears, the truth rises, the regret you keep pushing down, the insecurity you cover with jokes, the loneliness you pretend does not bother you, the anger you never admitted, the desire to be chosen by people who never really saw you. All of it begins to surface. And this is the moment most people reach for their phone. They scroll not because they are interested. They text, not because they have something meaningful to say. They refresh notifications, not because anything has changed. They do it because distraction feels easier than self-confrontation. Modern life has given us endless ways to avoid the inner room. Music in our ears, videos in our hands, opinions in our faces. Messages, feeds, noise, updates, entertainment. 1,000 little doors that help us escape the one place where real growth begins, our own mind. But the Stoics would tell you that discomfort is not always a warning to run. Sometimes discomfort is a teacher. Sometimes the uneasiness you feel when you are alone is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is proof that something inside you is asking to be understood. There is a kind of pain that comes from being abandoned by others. But there is a deeper pain that comes from abandoning yourself. And many people do not realize they have been doing it for years. Every time they silence their own values to be accepted. Every time they laugh at something that hurts them. Every time they chase someone who gives them crumbs of attention. Every time they say yes when their soul is quietly saying no. Then, when they are finally alone, they feel empty. But the emptiness did not begin in solitude. Solitude only revealed it. This is why being alone can become one of the most honest mirrors in your life. It shows you where you are still dependent, where you are still afraid. Where your peace is still controlled by other people's behavior. If one unanswered message can ruin your entire day, solitude will show you that. If one person's opinion can make you question your worth, solitude will show you that. If you cannot enjoy your own presence without needing noise, attention, or validation, solitude will show you that too. And that can hurt, but it can also free you. Because once you see what controls you, you can begin to take your power back. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about the quality of the mind. He understood that our suffering is not only caused by events, but by the judgments we attach to them. Being alone is not automatically painful. The story you tell yourself about being alone is what creates the wound. I am unwanted. I am falling behind. Everyone else has people. Nobody cares. My life is empty. These thoughts can make a quiet room feel like a prison. But a Stoic learns to question the thought before obeying the emotion. Is this true? Or is this just an old fear speaking? Am I actually alone, or am I being invited to return to myself? The moment you ask that question, solitude changes shape. It is no longer a punishment. It becomes a place of training. A place where you learn to sit with discomfort without surrendering to it. A place where you stop treating every feeling like a command. A place where you discover that anxiety can rise and fall without controlling your actions. This is where personal development becomes real, not in the quotes you save, not in the advice you repeat, but in the quiet moment when nobody is watching and you choose not to run from yourself. Solitude becomes powerful when it stops being something you endure and becomes something you practice. At first, being alone feels like absence. No voices, no attention, no one reaching for you, no one confirming that you matter. But slowly, if you stay there long enough, you begin to understand something most people never learn. The silence is not empty. It is a forge, and what it burns away is everything in you that was built only to survive the approval of others. Think about how much of your life can become a performance without you even noticing. You speak differently around certain people. You hide your real opinions to avoid rejection. You check who watched your story. You measure your worth by who replies quickly and who leaves you waiting. You walk into rooms asking invisible questions. Do they like me? Do I belong here? Am I enough? This is how a person becomes dependent without realizing it. Not dependent on food or shelter. Dependent on approval. Dependent on being noticed. Dependent on emotional permission from the outside world. And the more you need that permission, the easier you become to control. A single cold message can disturb your peace. A stranger's opinion can change your mood. One person's distance can make you doubt your entire identity. This is not freedom. This is emotional slavery dressed up as connection. The Stoics understood that the most important battle is not with other people. It is with the part of you that keeps surrendering your peace to things you cannot control. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you stop placing your happiness in the hands of what is outside your power, and solitude is where that lesson becomes real. Because when you are alone, there is no audience to impress, no crowd to follow, no one to rescue you from the responsibility of choosing who you are. You are forced to ask a harder question. What do I actually believe when nobody is watching? Not what sounds impressive. Not what makes people accept you. Not what gets applause. What do you truly value? What kind of person are you when there is no reward for appearing strong? What do you do when nobody is there to praise your discipline? What choices do you make when nobody will know? This is where self-mastery begins. Not in public confidence, but in private honesty. Anyone can look composed in front of others. Anyone can speak about growth when the room is listening. But solitude tests whether your principles are real when there is no one there to admire them. It teaches you to observe your emotions instead of obeying them. You feel the urge to text someone who disrespected you, and you pause. You feel the need to prove yourself online, and you pause. You feel the panic of being forgotten, and instead of running toward noise, you sit with it. That pause is power. That pause is where the old version of you loses control. Little by little, you stop performing. You stop asking the world to tell you who you are. You stop treating attention like oxygen, and you begin to build a quieter kind of confidence. The kind that does not need to announce itself. The kind that does not collapse when someone leaves. The kind that remains steady because it was not built in applause. It was built in silence. This is why being alone is not weakness. It is training. It is where you learn that you can lose approval and still keep your dignity. You can lose attention and still keep your direction. You can lose company and still keep yourself. And once you know that, the world becomes less frightening. Because you are no longer begging to be chosen. You have finally chosen yourself. But there is a danger in misunderstanding solitude. Because some people hear a word alone, and think it means becoming cold. They think strength means shutting everyone out. They think self-mastery means never needing anyone, never trusting anyone, never opening the door to love, friendship, or connection again. That is not Stoicism. That is fear wearing the mask of wisdom. The goal is not to become unreachable. The goal is to become unshakable. There is a difference. Isolation is when you withdraw because you are wounded. Solitude is when you step back because you are growing. Isolation says, I do not trust anyone. Solitude says, I must first learn to trust myself. Isolation is built from bitterness. Solitude is built from awareness. And if you cannot tell the difference, you may turn your healing into another prison. The Stoic does not reject the world. He simply refuses to be owned by it. He can love people deeply without handing them the keys to his peace. He can care without clinging. He can connect without becoming dependent. He can walk beside others without losing the path beneath his own feet. This is one of the quietest signs of personal development. You stop entering relationships from emptiness. You stop looking at people as if they are medicine for a wound you refuse to examine. You stop asking someone else to rescue you from the loneliness you have not learned to understand. Because when you fear being alone, you become easy to bargain with. You tolerate disrespect because silence seems worse. You accept half-hearted love because being chosen, even poorly, feels safer than not being chosen at all. You stay in rooms where your spirit shrinks because at least you are not by yourself. But that is not connection. That is self-abandonment with company. And many people are not lonely because they are alone. They are lonely because they are surrounded by people who require them to betray themselves. Solitude breaks that pattern. It teaches you that peace is not something another person gives you. It is something you must learn to protect. And once you have sat with yourself long enough to know your own worth, you begin to choose differently. You no longer chase every hand that reaches for you. You no longer confuse attention with affection. You no longer mistake chemistry for character. You begin to ask better questions. Does this person respect my boundaries? Do I feel more myself around them or less? Do they bring clarity to my life or chaos? Am I choosing them from peace or from panic? This is where solitude improves your relationships. Not by making you distant, but by making you honest. When you no longer need people to complete you, you are finally free to love them correctly. You do not demand that they become your identity. You do not use them to silence your fears. You do not punish them for failing to fill a space that was always yours to understand. Instead, you meet them as a whole person, not begging, not performing, not shrinking, not clinging. And from that place, connection becomes cleaner, stronger, more respectful. Because true connection is not two empty people trying to consume each other. It is two grounded people choosing to walk together without losing themselves. So do not use solitude as an excuse to become hard. Use it as a place to become clear. Step away when the noise makes you forget who you are. Return when your heart is steady enough to meet others without needing to be saved by them. That is the balance. To be independent without becoming closed. To be loving without becoming dependent. To stand alone without becoming bitter. And to understand that the person who can be peaceful alone will never again beg for a place where they are not respected. Solitude only changes you when you stop treating it like empty time. Being alone is not powerful by itself. A person can sit alone for years and still avoid themselves. They can be in a quiet room and still fill their mind with resentment, fantasy, comparison, regret, or fear. So the real question is not whether you are alone. The real question is what you do with the silence. Because solitude is like fire. It can warm you. It can refine you. Or, if you misuse it, it can consume you. The Stoic does not enter solitude to disappear from life. He enters solitude to return to life with more discipline, more clarity, and more command over himself. So begin simply. Put the phone away for a while. Not forever. just long enough to notice what happens inside you when nothing is feeding your need for stimulation. Notice the urge to check. Notice the discomfort. Notice the part of you that wants proof that someone is thinking about you. Do not judge it. Observe it. That observation is the beginning of freedom. Because what you can observe, you are no longer completely controlled by. Then ask yourself the questions most people avoid. What am I running from when I keep myself busy? Whose attention am I still waiting for? What pain am I trying to cover with noise? What kind of person do I become when nobody is watching? What do I say I value, but fail to practice in private? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to return you to yourself. Every honest answer becomes a tool. If you discover that you are afraid of being forgotten, then solitude teaches you to build a life that does not depend on constant recognition. If you discover that you keep chasing people who do not respect you, then solitude teaches you to rebuild your self-respect. If you discover that your mind is restless, undisciplined, and addicted to distraction, then solitude becomes the training ground where you learn to guide your attention instead of being dragged by it. This is how personal development becomes more than a phrase. It becomes a practice. One quiet hour, one honest journal entry, one walk without headphones, one evening where you do not reach for the person who only confuses your peace, one decision made from values instead of fear. This is how a person is rebuilt. Not all at once, not dramatically, but privately, repeatedly. In small moments where nobody claps, nobody sees, and nobody rewards you. And that is why those moments matter. Because the life you show the world is built from the choices you make when the world is not looking. Solitude teaches you to stop abandoning yourself. That may be the deepest lesson of all. You stop leaving your own center just because someone is distant. You stop betraying your values just to avoid rejection. You stop running from silence as if silence is proof that you are unloved. Instead, you begin to understand something quiet and unshakable. You can be alone and still be guided, alone and still be growing, alone and still be worthy, alone and still be whole. And once that truth settles into you, abandonment loses some of its power, because even if someone leaves, you no longer leave yourself. Even if the room is quiet, you no longer treat the quiet as an enemy. Even if the world forgets to applaud, you keep building. This is the Stoic power of being alone, not loneliness as a wound, but solitude as a discipline. A place where your mind becomes clearer, your standards become stronger, and your soul remembers its own weight. So when silence comes, do not rush to escape it. Sit with it. Listen to it. Train inside it. Because the strongest version of you may not arrive through noise, attention, or applause. It may arrive quietly. In the room you once feared. In the stillness you once avoided. In the solitude where you finally stopped waiting for the world to choose you and chose yourself. In the end, being alone is not the enemy. The enemy is living so disconnected from yourself that silence feels like a threat. Solitude does not take anything valuable from you. It takes away the noise, the masks, the borrowed opinions, and the desperate need to be seen by people who may not even understand you. And when all of that falls away, you are left with the one relationship you cannot escape, the relationship you have with yourself. This is the lesson the Stoics kept returning to. You cannot control who stays, who leaves, who approves, who misunderstands you, or who forgets your name. But you can control whether you abandon your own principles because of them. So use solitude wisely. Spend time without distractions. Walk without headphones. Sit without reaching for your phone. Write down what keeps disturbing your peace. Ask yourself what you are chasing, what you are avoiding, and where you have been giving away your power. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, but discomfort is not proof that you are broken. Sometimes it is proof that you are finally listening. The more you practice being alone with courage, the less you will beg for places where you are not respected. The less you will chase people who confuse your peace. The less you will fear silence. Because you will understand that being alone does not mean you are empty. It means you have space. Space to think, space to heal, space to rebuild. Space to become someone who no longer needs the world to constantly confirm his worth. So when solitude comes, do not run. Enter it like a Stoic, use it as a forge, and come out stronger than the person who went in. What is one thing solitude has taught you about yourself? Comment below so others can learn from your perspective. And if this message helped you, subscribe to Stoic Chisel to support the channel and help us keep